Got some awesome wallpapers you'll be able to download later if you want to use as your Zoom background in the future for these events. Also want to remind everyone that on a week from today, October 28th at 8 p.m. Eastern, we'll have the first movie making premiere of the 2021 tour. It'll be broadcast live on YouTube. You can check that out at campusmoviefest.com/CMF. Also, shout out to our partners at the Walt Disney Company, who are presenting the Women in Film category for the third year in a row. You can submit a film up through May 1st, but check out more at campusmoviefest.com/Disney. Also, our partners from the Elfenworks Foundation, their 10th year partnering with Campus Movie Fest. Again, some really cool opportunities for you to make films and share your stories with the world. Also, Pitch This, presented by the team at Ideas United, who produces Campus Movie Fest. You can find out more about that opportunity where you can win a grant for $15,000 and a development deal to take your story further. And last but not least, in terms of the details, we always want to work with you and to maintain those relationships and carry those into the future. And just like we have with our guests tonight, and to become part of that creative collective that we've established over the years, you can go to campusmoviefest.com/family to learn more and apply to be a member of our network. Throughout the evening, feel free to tweet, share your thoughts through any of our social channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Use the hashtag CMF and our handle at Campus Movie Fest. And now, without further ado, we'd love to introduce our panelists for the evening. So first up, we have Sarah Wilson Thacker, a writer-director whose work spans the last 10 years and includes Student Emmy Award-winning short films, music videos, and branded content. A finalist for the 2019 Sundance Creative Producing Lab, Shondaland Series Fest, Viacom Viewfinder Directors Program, and the Commercial Directors Diversity Program. Sarah has also previously assisted filmmakers Nancy Myers, Michael Phillips, and Ryan Case. Her recent work includes 2 short films for Google's Infinite Deviation Project, a fantasy pilot for the PlayStation Emerging Filmmaker Program, and an upcoming new competition series for DC Comics. Fingers crossed. She holds an MFA in directing from Chapman University and a BA in television production with a minor in theater from the University of South Florida. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Abe.
Next up, we have Zack Morrison. Zack is a writer-director from New Jersey. His work includes the Emmy-winning musical Everything's Fine, A Panic in D Major, the YouTube comedy show We Have a Show, and previously worked on the monologue teams at The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon and Late Night with Seth Meyers. He has an MFA from Columbia University School of the Arts and is a CMF Pooh Industries Lifetime Achievement Award winner from Rutgers University. Zack is currently based in LA and is in development on his first feature. Hi, Zack.
How's it going?
Good. And lastly, but definitely not least, Ian Chi. Ian was the creative director at Jubilee Media, which aims to create a movement for empathy and serves a global audience of 6 million plus followers. Known mostly for its hit web series like Middle Ground, Spectrum, and Odd Man Out, Jubilee is now expanding beyond digital media into feature films, TV shows, podcasts, and apparel in order to create a global ecosystem and community that takes a stand for empathy. In the past, Ian has created works for NASA, Apple, Nike, the New York Times, NBC Asian America, and YouTube, among others. His digital media work has collectively garnered more than 1 billion views to date. He is an INFP, officially the world's 11th best whistler as of 2012, a pastor's kid, and is known among his friends for saying life is such a trip. Please welcome Ian. Hey, Ian.
Hello. What a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, everyone. And for our guests at home, you can feel free to use the Q&A feature in Zoom to send questions our way. But I think we'll kind of just dive in and let the filmmakers speak for themselves to get things going. Could you all, just going through, maybe just take a a little time in starting with you, Sarah. Just kind of describe your journey from when you ended school, where you participated in Campus Movie Fest, to kind of where you are now, so that the students can kind of have that perspective.
Yeah, totally. So I did my undergrad at the University of South Florida, and I chose to go straight into grad school for film directing immediately afterwards. Film school is not for everyone, like a master's program isn't for everyone, but I knew from the time that I actually started undergrad that it was something that I wanted to do. And so I went to Chapman University, studied directing for 3 years. For me, it was the right choice. I learned how to be a director there. And I, more importantly, formed all of these incredible creative partnerships that to this day, I continue to work with my producers who did my short films at Chapman. I continue to work with my DPs. It was just invaluable for meeting people, because coming from Florida, I just knew no one in Hollywood. I knew no one in LA. So that was super valuable. I will add, I'm still paying off my student loans. So that's obviously pros and cons, but yeah, I think for me, it was definitely worth it. And then I don't know if we're going beyond grad school, Abe, should we kind of fast track forward, or do we want to go around again?
Whatever makes the most sense. I mean, if there's something that's super relevant to where you're at there, keep on going.
After I got out of film school, I took a full-time job for 2 years. I did creative direction for a Broadway show. I did a bunch of BTS pieces, and I followed a show that opened in Paris, and we went to Paris and then came to Broadway and then went to London. So that was a really cool experience. After doing that for 2 years, I quit and just to focus on freelance writing and directing. And I think anytime that happens, it's kind of slow going at first. The jobs are there's not going to be a bunch of jobs at first, but slowly you grow your network and you start getting more jobs and bigger jobs and better paid jobs. And that's kind of been my trajectory ever since leaving that first initial out of my master's program job. So yeah, that's kind of the long and short of where I am right now.
Appreciate it. Zack, we'll throw it to you.
Sure. My path was very similar. I also did an MFA program right out of grad school. Right out of undergrad. I was at Rutgers for college, which was an amazing 4 years, and doing CMF throughout that time definitely helped me build the tools and put more tools in the toolbox and just kind of learn how to, what it took to make a movie and how it all kind of came together. But I'm definitely the kind of person that needs a fire lit under me in order to motivate me. So I knew right around my junior year that going for an MFA was something I wanted to do as well. Applied to 3 different schools, and Columbia was the only one that said yes. So I made my choice very easy. And yeah, that was a 4-year MFA. I went in thinking I wanted to focus on directing, and I still consider myself a director, but I actually found that television writing was the route that I wanted to shift into, at least for the short term. And because a lot of the program there was very focused on writing, and a lot of my friends were writers, and the kind of writing on the wall was that the currency out in LA was going to be a good project and a good script. And so that's what I focused on in school. And while I was at grad school, I first got an internship at Late Night with Seth Meyers as the monologue intern. From there, while I was doing grad school and working on my thesis, I worked at Seth Meyers. I moved to Jimmy Fallon as their monologue intern, then moved to Saturday Night Live, and then eventually got promoted to the writer's assistant back at The Tonight Show. Doing that at the same time as doing my thesis film for Columbia, which was a musical. It actually played at Terminus last year. If anyone was there, it's called Everything's Fine, a Panic Attack in D Major. And all of the graduation and then my time at NBC all kind of happened around the same time. And so I decided to move out to LA. And since I've been out here since the beginning of 2019, I've worked a couple executive assistant jobs, the kind of sort of entry level position out here. I was Luc Besson's assistant at Europa Corp, who directed The Fifth Element and a bunch of other movies. I also worked at Hit Record, which is Joseph Gordon-Levitt's company. And since around January of this year, I've been focusing full time on freelance writing, freelance directing. Kind of like Sarah said, trying to get that like first thing off the ground, you know?
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. And Ian, tell us your story.
Oh man, I feel like this entire time I've been groping around in the fog of war, like not knowing how to go about make films and things like this. I didn't go to film school, and I had no idea, how to break into the industry. But I did CMF in college, and one of those films was called TikTok, and some people saw that. And I met one guy who worked at this production company in Grand Rapids, Michigan, out of all places. And I was like, okay, this is a production company. I can go there and see what happens. So after I graduated, I went there and I interned. That was my first foray just into the professional world of filmmaking. I was there for like 9 months, did a lot of, grunt work and things like that. And I took a lot of initiative to like make my own things and also make them like a free show reel without getting paid, which happened to like do well. And so I took that, and then I got some money from this video contest I did. I won like $9,000, and I took that and I made a leap to LA with no connections, and I had no idea how to still go about doing this thing. But I had one friend, Joe Sill, if you're watching, shout out to you. That was like the first gig I got in LA, cutting a music video that he directed. And from there, it just snowballed into meeting more people and getting more opportunities. And so I bounced around doing freelance for about 2.5, 3 years. I got to do some great branded work. Along when I met this fellow Korean American guy running this channel called Julie, and he said he wanted to grow this YouTube channel to become like the size of Disney. And I was like, this guy's crazy. I don't know what he's talking about. But it was a small channel at the time, and I was just curious to make things that would actually have a relationship with an audience. Because a lot of times when you're doing freelance work for agencies or production companies, you make this thing, but you don't really know where it goes. So you don't have that connection. So I wanted to feel that connection with an audience. And so that was 3.5 years ago. I joined as the creative director, as like just a company of 3 people. And then 3 years later, it kind of exploded. And so been blessed to be a part of some amazing just things that have happened, and a lot of good people have been a part of that journey as well. And then I'm actually not at Jubilee anymore, and so my next endeavor is a mystery. So we'll see what happens next. I have no idea. I'm just gonna rest with my family during the holidays for now, and then see what goes from there.
Awesome, thanks, Sal. Obviously, the people that will be watching and the people that are here now are CMFers, and you each had very specific CMF experiences. And can you talk a little bit about, I guess, what makes CMF an interesting learning experience, and I guess what you took away from those experiences and how you've kind of used that insight or those learnings in your careers up to this point? Maybe
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sarah. Yeah.
We want to do the same order. I don't want to.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, about some stuff that Ian and Zach were saying too. And I think the thing that's great about CMF and like what it kind of gets you in the mindset to do is to always say yes and to do everything. And that's something that has been very useful to me ever since, my time with CMF. But I mean, it's like they were saying, like I've done 5 or 6 internships. Like out of CMF, I actually got an internship from meeting someone at a panel once. That was like an on-set internship with Warner Brothers. And that was my first on-set experience of like a major Hollywood movie. And then just like I've assisted so many people like to pay the bills and make some money while you're also like out there freelance directing. I still to this day sometimes freelance edit and cut stuff together. I edit my own music videos. If you can become a jack of all trades in a sense, you don't have to be the best, and you should absolutely work with people who are better than you at those individual things whenever you can. But I think it's like a really great value system to instill of like always learn how to do everything so that you can always like have a conversation with whoever you're working with about any of those areas. And just always saying yes. I think that's that's a great thing to like carry forth.
Yeah. Zack or Ian?
Yeah. I love that, like, always say yes thing. My buddies and I, who we did CMF with, we had a saying called "Do It Live," which was very much the same thing. You know, we all have comedy and improv background, so it's that yes and mentality of just like taking the thing and running with it. So we definitely picked up a lot of that from CMF. I mean, you know, literally we having to do it in 7 days. We would stay up all night, skip classes, which our professors loved. And we just would stay up all night making movies. And that was, at the time, the most we've ever done in terms of filmmaking. And so it was kind of like the dream, you know? And then my freshman year at CMF Hollywood was the year that TikTok won. And so I remember, like, we thought our movie was the best thing we ever made. And then we went to CMF Hollywood and saw so many amazing films and met so many awesome filmmakers. And we were like, oh, we gotta do better next year. And so it's that, like, it was that community. And over the course of 4 years doing it, you know, I met some people who are still I'm really good friends with today, and who are still frequent collaborators. And so just the kind of network, not only like within your friend group, but just the people you meet through CMF, like everyone on this panel here, it just kind of opened doors that weren't there when I started college. And then once CMF Hollywood became a thing, then the Cannes trip happened, and that's the poster from 2013, and like that was an amazing trip. And so it kept opening doors and kind of like allowing me to zoom out a little bit and see what the next thing was. And being able to do that with people who are my really good friends, and you find your team, you found your squad, and so that's kind of what CMF did for me.
Ian?
Yeah, that's similar to my own experience. You know, a lot of my own filmmaking has always been just kind of me doing my own thing since like middle school. I've made my own films since middle school, but it's really nice to have like a centralized kind of community place where everyone can actually, you know, CMF is a linchpin of sorts that just brings all sorts of people together. So, you know, I'm like just witnessing a lot of my colleagues over time grow in real time. You know, I can't believe it's been like 9 years since I did, you know, my sophomore film for CMF, but over time, like you're kind of part of this wave of sorts that you're writing together, and you kind of witness each other's growth over time, which is really inspiring. So, you know, CMF people older than us and younger than us right now, it's like, you know, there's like an unspoken bond, like a community of sorts, which is really nice. It's very empowering. You know, it's not just you doing your own thing. I've met a lot of people through CMF, which is amazing. And yeah, it's just cool to know that, you know, it's kind of like I don't know, if someone did CMF, there's automatically like some kind of instant bond. Like at parties, I've met people who've done CMF. It's like, oh, you did that too, and you start talking about it. It's like, oh yeah, I went to Hollywood, which is a nice way to be able to connect with people.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you all. Jumping back to some of what you were kind of talking about and kind of your path after college, there's a question from one of the CMFers out there, you know, asking about if you have an MFA, how did that help you as a filmmaker, and what would, and then on the other sort of side of that token, like what would you recommend to someone if they don't intend to pursue the MFA? So I don't know if Zack or Sarah, you want to take that first, and then Ian, you can kind of follow up on that second.
Sure. I'll jump in. I would say, like, first and foremost, to echo what Sarah said, it's doing an MFA is not the end all be all answer. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, also awesome. I know in my experience, the actual degree, like the piece of paper, is worthless. That's not, unless you're trying to be a teacher, that's not for me why I would recommend someone go get their MFA. It's very much more the journey towards graduating and towards getting that degree that for me was what made the experience worth it. The people that you meet in your class were the people who, you know, we were in the crucible of boot camp for a couple years, and we are now really, really good friends, and they're now my people out here in LA. I found that the process of getting my degree it forced me to try things that were different and try things I never would have done if I didn't have that do it or you fail structure. And my thesis film and like the scripts that I left school with were stuff that I never would have even thought I was capable of writing my senior year in undergrad. But that said, that, you know, I had a very positive experience. I know a lot of people, that's not the environment that allows them to make that thing. And so it was just, for me, I found a place where I was able to do the thing that I needed to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, like for me, it's the ability to, whether or not you go to a film school, in my opinion, it's you're going to be propelled by making movies and meeting people. And so if you can do that outside of the film school structure, then that's great. Then you don't need that environment. But if you need that environment in order to make movies and meet people, then maybe you should consider it. I will also say the one thing that I found really helpful in like that film school environment was the critical feedback loop, which is something that you might not get as much outside of it. Like people tear your work to shreds in such a brutal way that is so necessary for you to like grow as a filmmaker. But again, there's no reason why you can't cultivate an environment like that in a writer's group that you assemble, or, you know, a screening group. You know, like I think that everything that you do in film school, it's possible to do outside of it. It's just you have to like take on that workload a little bit more to make it happen.
Yeah, the sense I get, I didn't go to grad school, but the sense I get is from my friends is that it's an incredible place to meet people. But I actually applied to USC grad film school, got accepted, and chose not to go there so I could go to Jubilee. But I do feel like the benefit of it is it's like an incubator where you have immense creative freedom to do like anything you want. Commercial need and monetizable and things like that. And you could monetize while you're still in school, and that's probably a really smart thing to do. The other thing I just noticed people doing is like they think, you know, if you've been in school your entire life and you think you have to go to grad school and then get a PhD or whatever, it kind of puts you in this space where you feel like you have to like climb this hierarchy. Whereas film, it's so saturated that you just have to make your own films without asking for permission, and that's what propels you forward. So exactly what Sarah said, I think what propels you forward ultimately is just your own initiative.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, what's, in terms of like hurdles, like what would you say that each of your sort of biggest hurdles in, you know, gaining traction? You're all in sort of different places and have come from different paths, but you know, what are those hurdles been in the past, or what are you up against now, I guess?
I think just speaking personally, for me, I have always been a director who wrote their own material. And after I got out of film school, I had to learn how to write, like, because at least at my school, like we were very tracked and emphasis focused. So although I was writing my own short films and all of that, like I didn't take the time to properly sit down and learn how to write feature films and like television until after I got out. That was just how I did it. Some people do both at the same time, and that's great. So for me, it's been like film school part 2 on my own, you know, like trying to figure out how to become a writer. And I was watching a Judd Apatow masterclass, which I highly recommend, all of the filmmaking masterclass series. And he said something like, a friend of his told him early on, it's like, yeah, it was, I had written my 10th script by the time I sold one. Like my first script that I sold was my 10th. And I would say, like, right now I have my first feature film that I'm currently casting, and it's probably like around my 10th script. So, you know, some people are geniuses and like they write one script and do one draft and they sell it, and, you know, how great for them. But you know, I think for a lot of people, it's trial and error and failing upwards.
Awesome. Zach?
Yeah, I think for me the hurdle was very much, I mean, kind of what we're talking about here, like navigating after school, because I went straight into grad school, and it was great. It was the environment I needed to be in, and then it was over. And not only was school over at once, but my job at NBC was also over, and my living on the East Coast near family and friends was also like, all of those things happened like all at the same time. And I kind of moved out to LA on a bit of a whim because a friend of a friend was like, hey, I got a place opening up. Do you want to crash here for a couple months and like get your feet wet? And so I kind of just like took that leap of faith and went. And I'm glad I'm out here, but for me, like, and I still feel I'm trying to like navigate the how do I navigate LA, which is a whole different conversation. And, you know, even just like you got to know someone that knows where the job postings are put in a secret Facebook group that you don't even have access to, like all of those things. I feel like I'm still figuring out just where to go, like where to look next. And I realize I'm very sarcastic a lot, and I don't think an MFA degree is worthless. I just wanted to make sure no one took me the wrong way there, but still figuring it out, you know?
Yeah.
Man, there's a variety of different hurdles. Overall, just from a very high level, I think I personally used to come purely from like the artistic side of things, and I'm very, you know, kind of an abstract intellectual thinker and things like that. So I really had to learn, I think, what film means as a business, and you know, through trial and error, and kind of especially working at Jubilee, realizing that there is such a thing as like market demand, or like, you know, just what sells better and things like that. And then really striking that balance where you're still making things in your own voice that you're passionate about, but also making sure that it can sell. That's like a really precise art form that I really admire folks who are able to do that consistently. That's something we really think about a lot at Jubilee. How can we make things that are meaningful, things we're curious about, but also, you know, viral and gets like millions of views? It's like not a formula, but I think that's something constantly that I've been thinking about, especially at Jubilee, to have that overlap all the time. It just requires paying a lot of attention to like the world, what you're interested in, and also not getting, not trying to do things just for views, because that's a very slippery slope too.
Yeah. There was a question in that it can't come in, and if anyone out there wants to submit a question on the Zoom, you can go to the Q&A button at the bottom of Zoom and submit a question for us. But was that if any of you had seen Ratchet on Netflix, but A, you could answer that, but B, what are you watching now? What's inspiring you? What is blending that art and business, and kind of, especially now where so much content is being put out to try to quell the fact that, you know, a lot of other stuff can't be done right now. Jump in, whoever.
I watched the pilot of Ratchet. I don't know. It's beautiful. So well shot. Sarah Paulson, chef's kiss. I mean, what more can you say? It's so hard to answer that question. And I feel like these days of what are you watching? Because there's just like, I don't know, I get anxiety about like, what should I be watching? Like there's so much material. It's hard to keep up with everything. But actually recently I've been into like the Criterion channel, like incredible. I just watched my first Agnes Varda film. Like I've been on a French filmmaker kick, Blue is the Warmest Color, Amélie, like, I don't know. I've been into some foreign French cinema lately. I highly recommend it.
Awesome.
I have not seen Ratchet. I've been watching stuff that's just fun. That is like, I've been watching the Marvel movies again, just because it brings me joy. You know, I recently did a rewatch of Joss Whedon's Firefly, which is one of my favorite shows. And I just, especially with quarantine and all the craziness, I've been watching stuff that was what I would watch either like as a kid or in college to like remind myself why I wanted to be a filmmaker and a writer, and why I wanted to get into this kind of crazy industry. Because I think there's a lot of like, oh, you should watch this. Like, oh, that's, you got to make something like that. And like, I want to make stuff that is like just fun. And so I've just been trying to watch fun stuff, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, I have no idea what Ratchet is, so I have not checked it out, but I probably should. Man, my taste is pretty eclectic. I'm like all over the place. Recently, Just last night, I was binge watching Jonathan Glazer commercials. He's the guy who did Under the Skin, and his craftsmanship on his work is just masterful. It's absolutely incredible. Someone I'm really inspired by recently that I watched The Wind Rises. Hayao Miyazaki, the guy who did Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke. He's incredible because he's just purely himself, but also so imaginative and serving a pretty wide audience as well. So I really admire that.
Awesome. I actually had blue is warmest color in my, like, there's like because I subscribe to the channel, so there was like a sale. So I had it in my shopping cart today, but I missed the sale. So, and actually my partner and I, Zacker, we were watching all the Marvel movies as well. So full circle. There's another question from Christine who through the Q&A. How do you go about combating imposter syndrome? You know, I think there's a lot of that going around, especially now. There's such a sense of scarcity, and yeah, did you all have to fight that? And if so, like, how did you work through that?
I mean, everyone, I don't know. I guess it's just like who you're in the room with, maybe, that will determine whether or not, like, I'm feeling very self-conscious or not, because there's so many geniuses in our industry. But I think it's important to remember that everyone has completely failed and fallen flat on their face at some point. Everyone has started, like, not knowing something. Like, every brilliant director has probably made a horrible, horrible short film. So I don't know. I just think it's important to remember that, like, everyone is bad sometimes, and that gives me a little more confidence, at least.
Yeah, I feel it now. You know, like, I'm out here just thinking, what am I doing? There's no way this isn't going to work. And that's like my default, like, state of being. But what is comforting and what helps me get through it is also remembering that everyone else also, kind of like Sarah said, like, everyone feels this to some degree. And there are good days, there are bad days, but like little things, like the best piece of advice I got, especially in regards to imposter syndrome, was it was at Seth Meyers, and we had a chance to just really chat for like a hot second. And I referred to myself as an aspiring writer, and he said, stop. You're either writing or you're not writing. You either are a writer or you're not a writer. And just thinking about it that way, I feel a lot of us say, like, oh, we're aspiring filmmakers, we're an aspiring director, aspiring this. It's like, no, we're doing it, you know? And even though we're at the beginning of our artistic careers, we're still doing the thing. And so the way that I get through that feeling sometimes is just either to do a small thing or to write a small thing or to shoot a small thing, and just remind myself, oh, wait, no, I like this. Like, this is a fun activity that I want to do with the rest of my life. And we're always going to have days where we feel like this is not for us, but you just got to keep making stuff, and eventually it will be.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think it's quite normal, unless you're like Kanye West or something. But I do listen to Kanye West sometimes when I'm just feeling insecure, because it gives me like an adrenaline shot and boost. It's kind of like there's always next levels to get up to in terms of the scale of your work, or like things you've never tried. But I almost feel like every time you're going up another level, you just have to make the leap despite feeling it. And then when you land, you're a little bit higher than where you used to be when you first jumped, if that makes sense. And you'll get used to these levels, but you also don't want to be complacent and just stay on the same level, unless that's what you really enjoy, I guess. But yeah, I still deal with a lot of insecurity in terms of like the next thing I'll do or what I want to do. There's tremendous doubt all the time of like, is this going to work? I don't even know if I am capable of doing this. A lot of headiness and things like that. But I would say talk with good friends, journal, be honest about your feelings. And the fact that you have imposter syndrome is probably very human and normal. And so, learn to feel it and kind of embrace it and take the leap regardless.
Appreciate that. Kevin asks about this idea that, you know, during school and undergrad doing CMF, you would progress in your craft and your academic studies, et cetera. Now that, you know, you might be graduating soon or out in the real world, like, how do you keep up that momentum towards you're kind of maintaining that same level of ambition that you had when you had some of that focused time and that structure around it?
I mean, I think we've all kind of touched on it, which is just keep making stuff, like always keep making stuff, even if it's on your iPhone. I think that, you know, one of the earlier questions, Abe, I think was about like what did you expect after you got out of school, and like,
Yeah.
you know, what
Yeah.
what did you think that trajectory would be
Yeah.
like? And I think, at least for people coming from like fancy film schools, like everyone has this idea of like, well, it's going to be 2 or 3 years and then I'm going to be a fancy feature filmmaker and everyone will love me. And that's just so not the case sometimes. But I will say it's like the reason why that's so not the case sometimes is because in order to make movies, like you have to have resources. And so if you can write to your resources, if you can create something to the resources that you have a lot more control. And I think it's always like, so like if you can write a movie that's a road trip that you star in and you get your friend to star and you shoot it on your iPhone, like Tangerine was one of like the best movies of the last, 5 or 10 years, in my opinion. So I think that like if you can create to your resources and then just keep creating whatever that is, then you can tell yourself yes. Otherwise, you do get into a situation where like you have to wait for your resources to catch up with like what you've written and want to create. Like for me, 7 years out of grad school I'm just now at the point where like my producing partners are no longer the assistants, they are the execs, and so they can do things now that I couldn't do 7 years ago. And also just like remembering that, sometimes you might feel like, well, I've already done so much, like why do I have to like prove myself and do this to get the next thing? But like just keep doing it. Sometimes you do have to prove yourself like 1,000 times. Like I'm gonna shout out our mutual friend Joe one more time. Joe Sill is like a really talented feature and commercial director, and he like is so good at creating opportunities for himself, like be it through like his VFX work or through like I think, Joe, forgive me, but like at one point like he wasn't getting car commercials, and so he went off and took a bunch of his own money and like made this insane car commercial. Like, and I feel like somebody like me would sit back and be like, I don't want to have, like, I've already done like commercials for Disney and NASA and Apple, and like why should I have to go off and like make a spec car commercial to like prove myself? But I think that's the kind of ethics sometimes that it takes to survive. It's like, oh no, I'm just gonna go and do it, because then nobody can tell me I can't do it. So I don't know, it's a long-winded answer, but.
Yeah, makes sense. Zack or Ian? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think just finding ways to make something is the most important thing, especially when you get out of school. And that's something I find myself struggling with now, is because when you're in school, it's like intense and you have structure and you have deadlines and you have like 9 different things going on at once. And then you have a side thing on top of those 9 things and you're just constantly going. And then when you get out of school, it's this vacuum of nothingness for a while. And sometimes, you fill that with a day job that's like so not the thing, or sometimes you find ways to keep doing something with that time, but like in the back of your head, you're like, this is a waste of time. I need to be doing, like, that little voice talks to you about you're doing the wrong thing. What are you doing with your life? And for me, the way I like to fight that is knowing that like my big thing, whatever that is, whether that's my first feature or, landing that first staff writer job, which I don't have control over myself, whatever the goal is, knowing that's going to take time, working on that when you can, but also giving yourself, having a project that doesn't take a lot of work or take a lot of effort, but equally as satisfying. For me, like I like to write like joke songs or song parodies and like post them to Instagram. Or like my buddies and I really just only when we need something to do, we do a YouTube like sketch comedy show just for us and like the 5 people that subscribe to us on YouTube. And while that's not the thing that we're banking our careers on in any way, but that gives us that like emotional satisfaction of like, hey, we're putting something out this week, we're making something. It keeps us in the habit of creating. And that way, you know, when a day off comes or this Saturday comes, we can like go to the beach, we can take a day off, we can allow ourselves the time to like not feel like we need to be on 24/7. Because learning how to like shut your brain off from creating is like just as important as learning how to stay creative. Because for me, I tend to go so much that I like burn out, and I need to remind myself like it's okay to take a day for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, just echoing that. I think it's very important to like there's input and output. Input is like, you know, watching other people's works, going places, having conversations, reading books and things like that. And output is like the work that you actually create, and, you know, there being a balance there. You know, if you're too much on either side, you're just a little, you know, wonky and not quite on solid footing, but there's kind of ebbs and flows to that. But I think most importantly, it's just like, man, follow your curiosity and joy, because I think that's what just gives the most energy and fulfillment. And if you just follow that curiosity, like the stuff you make or do, it won't even feel like work, because it's something you feel very passionate about and you really love it, and it just becomes natural. Like that's the goal, to have that all aligned, I think, in terms of like just everything you're doing, what you're exploring, what you're creating, who you're hanging out with, and constantly kind of trying to create this integrated, you know, way of being that is totally true to who you are in all buckets of what you do.
Yeah, really appreciate that. This is a question that we hear a lot, and I think it's an interesting question now of all times during COVID, right? Like, what is it a requirement to live in LA to like make it? And if so, how has what's going on with the pandemic affected that? And also, like, kind of what are you seeing as, you know, the near future looks like in COVID, especially in LA?
I think it just depends on what you want to do, like what your career trajectory is. I would say, you know, again, going back to that idea of like, it's about who you know, and it's about your connections. So a really great way, like if you want to go and, you know, work at a bunch of production companies or work on a bunch of sets, then yeah, you probably either need to be in Atlanta or LA or, you know, Vancouver or something. So I feel like, yes, I do think you have to be in LA. No, I don't think you have to be in LA during COVID. No one is. So many people are not. There's no point. But yeah, I think that unless you know you have a really strong network, once you have that established, no, you definitely don't have to be in LA. But until you have your network established, I think that it does really help in terms of meeting people who can help you make things.
Yeah, I'm actually flying back to New Jersey in like a week and riding out the rest of the year back home. So I don't think, you know, you don't need to be anywhere now because of, you know, we do this now. We can Zoom from anywhere now. But you know, in college, you know, at Rutgers, the last place I wanted to go was LA. And maybe it's just like the New Jersey, like Bruce Springsteen, like I'm gonna do it myself, whatever, you know, mentality. But I was like, I'm never going to LA. I'm never doing it. I'm gonna do it my way. We're gonna do it here. And then 5 years later, I'm out here just because I had friends from grad school who were all moving out. And I was fortunate because at Columbia, the producers graduate a year ahead of the writer directors. Sometimes even 2 years ahead. And so by the time I was even considering moving out to LA or like, what am I going to do after school? I already had like 10 friends on top of undergrad friends, on top of high school friends who kind of found their way out here. And so it just sort of, all the pieces kind of came together for me of like, oh, maybe now's the time. Maybe I should do it now and at least try, because I can always like go back home and get the CMF band back together and like shoot the feature for no money like we used to, because that's not going anywhere. But the like, I need to at least give it a shot, was sort of the thought process. And then, you know, like you do it, and then you kind of realize like, oh wait, everything, the creative decisions are happening in LA, and like even the cop shows that shoot in New York are written in Los Angeles. And so if you want to get in on the creative side, you know, I started seeing that there were benefits to being out here despite my homesickness.
Yeah, I feel like there definitely is. LA is unprecedented when it just comes to the amount of people here engaged in, you know, arts and entertainment and things like that. That said, during this time, I don't know if it's nearly as necessary to, like, I don't think it is probably. Like, people are meeting everyone online right now. I've met a bunch of people mostly online, actually, not in person. And I also was having another conversation with a friend of just like, especially during COVID times, we're kind of asking ourselves, wait, why are we in LA again? Like, do we have to stay? Why don't we like go to some cabin in the woods and just like right there? And, you know, we can, if we have a production somewhere, we can just go there for the day or something like that. So all that to say, I don't know if I have a concrete, simple answer. I think with initiative, you can meet people online. You don't have to be in LA. Yeah.
Awesome. We just had a comment in the Q&A from, you guys might know David Romer, co-founder of Campus Movie Fest. He just wants you to know how awesome he thinks the three of you are, and how honored he and the rest of the team have been to see your work grow and evolve over the years, CMF and beyond. So he says, I'm okay too. So thanks, Dave. Appreciate that.
Got the priorities right.
Right.
There.
Yeah. Another anonymous question from the audience. Making projects during this time doesn't seem as easy to do as it was pre-pandemic. They ask, should I wait until things are back to normal or find a way to adapt? I think we've kind of touched on some of that. But.
That's so hard to answer. I mean, I guess it's like it all comes down to the scope of what you're trying to do, and if you can do that safely, like according to the, you know, film guild laws in your state, you know. So yeah, I think there's safe ways to get back to work, and I know lots of people are doing it right now. But it depends on the scale of what you're trying to do, probably.
Yeah, I would definitely not. I mean, personally, I would not feel comfortable asking a crew to come together for anything that required a crew. You know, like my friends and I, like my roommates, we shot a sketch in our living room, like CMF style, like me directing and holding my 5D and us just doing a short little movie. And that was fun. And we did that because we can do that. But, you know, if I had something that was bigger that could not be done in quarantine, or the aesthetic of doing it in lockdown would like not serve the story of what we were shooting, then I would totally just put it on ice, because the rest of the industry is kind of on ice right now. But now's the time for like cabin in the woods horror movies, because you can shoot that. So it really just depends on what you're working on.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to do what you feel the most. But if what you feel is you really do want to make a movie during this time, I would say you have to find a way to have as much leverage and ownership, and like not making anything determine whether or not you're going to do it if you want to do it, if that makes sense. So like finding a way, regardless of the circumstance, there's always a way. But if you don't want to do it and you feel like you can work more on the movie, then before you shoot it, that's cool too.
Thank you. We're coming down to the last 10 minutes, so got a couple quicker questions, let's say. Someone's asking for favorite CMF film recommendations other than yours, and if you know the filmmaker and or have you ever connected with them outside of you know, in the real world. I don't want to, you know, age us, but some of it.
I'm so out of it. I'm so sorry. Like
No.
I 10 years ago was my day. So I am so sorry. But like there were a lot of talented filmmakers back in the day. But yeah.
Zack,
I mean, like like from the ones that are like the winners, you can go up and look them up, and they're all really great. I still, like, my friends and we still laugh about, I don't even know what the name of the movie was, but it was about these two guys who wanted to start a band to change the world. And it was like a musical, and like they were singing like, we're going to start the band to change the world. And it was my favorite. We still laugh about that. And yes, like that year at CMF, like I think his name was Levi, and they're from Colorado, and we hung out with them all week long at CMF Hollywood. And now we still chat. And there was another one, it's called Pound Sand, Mr. Hitchcock, which was just like perfect. But those had nothing to do with, like, those were not the movies that won. Those were not our movies or our friends' movies. They were just like perfect gems.
I thought of one. Sorry.
You don't have to.
Butterfly King, obviously. Directed by Steven Wilson. A genius.
Yeah. That's still one of my, it's timeless. Google all of these. Go to campusmoviefest.com. You can watch all these. Ian, you have any stand out?
Yeah, I met a really close friend whose film won Best Picture at Georgia Tech the same year that I did TikTok. It was called The Whispers of Shaitan, I think, which was like so heartwarming. Or heartwarming is not the right answer, but it struck me a lot, and it was very inspiring. And we met up and we hit it off, and we're still really good friends to this day. So very thankful to have come across that one.
Awesome. In these last couple minutes, any advice? I know we've been talking about advice, but the students graduating this year, it's a very specific world that is happening, and any sort of final sentiment or parting words for that group would be awesome.
Like advice or encourage, like
advice.
I mean, don't be an asshole. I think you stand out through kindness, through knowing how to read a room. And by that, I mean like knowing when to talk and to not talk. And I personally would always err on the side of not talking. And then being, when you do talk, having really good ideas. And I think that will get you far.
Yeah, I agree with the don't be an asshole. It's so easy to kind of stay in your bubble of like student filmmaking and think more than the person across the room from you. But more often than not, you don't. And so just kind of learning how to like just be a nice person and be like the fun person that other people want to be around when you're on set. And then something that I found, like, especially when in terms of like, where's the next thing? What do I look for? How do I find it? And I think it's very much and if you build it, they will come mentality where, whether it's like finding representation or finding like the next project or whatever it is, like, as long as you just kind of keep your head down and keep working and like put the effort in, the things will come your way. And like, the universe has a funny way of like opening up a door right at the moment you need it. And so just kind of like, keeping a good perspective and having faith in yourself and just, little bits every day.
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give is like, school teaches you to approach life in a pretty systematic way. Like you go through grade 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and it's like this hierarchy that you climb up, and there's like certain steps along the way. Once you're out of school, all that, you can throw that out the window because it actually holds you back from taking leaps. So, when you go and work at a company and someone asks you to like do X, the most common mistake I see is people exactly just doing X because that's what they think they're supposed to do. But you can do X, Y, Z, A, Z, apostrophe, exclamation point, like break rules and ask for forgiveness afterwards. Don't ask for permission. And if you take initiative like that and take it upon yourself to always do things on your own without being in some kind of system. You just there's a lot more opportunities that are created that way for yourself. And then the second piece of advice I would give is, for such a long time, like approaching the industry, there's like a fog of mystery of like, how does this all work? Like, I don't know, like hopefully I make this thing and someone picks it up and I don't know, I'll make it and submit to a festival and hopefully someone picks it up. Seek information, like seek out people who've been in the industry for a long time, like seek out mentors. They just have so much knowledge that would save you years and years instead of just trying to figure it out on your own. And there's a lot of people who are willing to share their heart and their advice just because they've been there and done that, and people like pouring into other people too. So seek out mentorship and seek out information will expedite your journey so much.
Awesome. I really can't thank you all enough for joining us tonight on our inaugural CMF workshop series. Thanks to each of you. I don't know if there's anything you want the audience to know to follow you someplace or any of that good stuff, but feel free to pimp yourself. Otherwise, it's just been a pleasure, and we always look forward to see what each of you will create next. Awesome. With that, we'll say good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.